Dawa Steven Sherpa. I'm from Nepal. And today I'll be talking about some of the projects or some of the work I've had the privilege of being involved in Nepal. It's mostly to do with cleaning up the mountains, but not just that, it also touches a bit on climate change issues, so do bear with me on that. My story, I'm going to tell it in a chronological order. That's the best way I can actually explain it. So I'm going to start in 2007 with the Everest Base Camp Bakery. I actually set this up in 2007 because the year before I was climbing on a mountain called Choyu in Tibet. And at that time, I met a lot of climbers and expeditions that were very, very hostile towards each other or very suspicious towards each other, and they weren't very nice to each other. And I didn't like that, and I was really quite upset by that. And so I said, the next time I go climbing anywhere, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to set something up where people who want to socialize, who want to be friends, can come together and just have a jolly good time, because after all, we're doing something that very few people in the world have the opportunity to do. And so I set up the Base Camp Bakery, and it was a great success. Everybody loves apple pie, right, at 5,000 meters. So it was a great success, but it had a side effect that I didn't actually anticipate, which was that it wasn't just the climbers that were coming there. All the trekkers coming up to Everest Base Camp were also visiting the Base Camp Bakery. And at the end of the season, end of the climbing season, we'd carried out 15 60-liter barrels of human waste, of shit, that was being collected in our toilets. In other words, had the Base Camp Bakery toilet not been there, would be 15 barrels worth of shit all over the glacier or behind rocks. So that was quite an interesting experience for me. But it was also interesting in the way that for me personally, it gave me a lot of self-confidence, because I was really, fresh out of university, and this was me testing myself against the world and testing my ideas against the world. And because the bakery did become a success and people appreciated it, and I saw the real effect of it, it gave me a great amount of confidence to go further and do things. And that was very important for the following year, because when I was climbing, this was the first time I got on the top of Everest, and sorry I didn't wipe my nose. When I was climbing on Everest that year, I realized how much garbage there was up there and how much human waste there was up there, and there wasn't really any mechanism to clean it up or any mechanism to stop it from happening again. And not only that, also while we were climbing, there were a lot of things happening, especially in the icefall. I myself nearly died in the icefall when Seracs collapsed. Sherpas had told me to turn back because it was very dangerous. I did, and exactly the point where I turned back, which was at the base of the football field, the entire football field collapsed. And so for me that also rung home a message, which was, this is dangerous, this is bad, and things are going to get worse. Unfortunately, that prediction did come true this year, and we lost a lot of our friends in the icefall, but I don't want to go into that too much right now. So the first thing to do, something tangible, clean up, something tangible, garbage issue. Climate change is a little bit more wishy-washy. It's up there. It's something that a mountaineer cannot really do very much about. But I'll get onto that a little bit later. But the garbage itself, I knew I could do it because I could pick it up. And so I looked at a way to clean up the mountain. And unfortunately, all the expeditions in previous years that had been doing cleanups were anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million to organize. But that's not money I have in my pocket. So I wanted to do something on the mountain, but I didn't know how. And actually, the answer was right in front of us, which was, oh, hang on. This has gone into screensaver mode. Okay, can you put the word? And the answer, can you put the password in for me, please? Thank you. And the answer came to me because I like to look at a situation and see what's already there rather than bringing in something new. And the answer was Sherpas. Of course, it would have to be. But not just Sherpas, not gathering a group of Sherpas to take there to clean the mountain, but rather Sherpas who are already there. When we climb up with food, fuel, cans, rope, whatever, and then we set up camp, camp 1, camp 2, camp 3, camp 4, whatever it may be, and then we all come down empty. Well, that was an untapped resource. These guys are strong as hell going up, carrying all that. Well, they're going to be superhuman coming down, right? So I approached all the Sherpas and I said, hey guys, if you find garbage on the way, why don't you pick it up and bring it down to base camp to me, and for every kilo, I'll give you 100 rupees, which is roughly $1. So I did that, and every day at 4 o'clock at base camp, we did what was called the weighing and the paying. So it was an immediate, it's an immediate work and reward system. So you go out and you clean the mountain today, and later in the day you get cash for it. And so I call this scheme cash for trash. And it was very, very successful, actually. The first year, we managed to gather about 970 kilos, which would be about 2,000 pounds, I believe. And so in 2008, I thought, okay, I'll try to double that. So I took a budget for 2,000 kilos, but that year we managed to gather 5,000 kilos, you know? And that was because of the conditions on the mountain. There was less snowfall, so more garbage was visible. But not only did it clean the mountain, what I also noticed, what I also observed, was the fact that the guys who were involved, anybody who brought garbage off the mountain, and there were hundreds of Sherpas who were involved with this, you also noticed them then later on telling people not to throw. So when they were with their friends having a cup of tea somewhere on the icefall or at the Western Coombe, they were telling, hey, don't throw that wrapper, I just cleaned this area up yesterday. So that was again, one of those side effects that I wasn't anticipating. And even today, you know, when the problem looks very big, nobody wants to do something about it. But once they're involved and they see the impact they have, they realize that they can actually keep contributing to that if they just change their behavior. And so I think that has had a great benefit on more garbage not being created on Everest. We've run that program now since 2008, so that's 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Unfortunately, we couldn't do the cleanup this year, so I'll continue with that again next year. But so far, we've managed to collect just under 15,000 kilos, which is 30,000 pounds of garbage off of Mount Everest. The other issue that also I talked about, and here's a picture of a CMC at Everest Base Camp. This is the same device right here. This is, Roger, you invented this, right?
Worked on it. Yeah.
You worked, okay. Well, Roger was very, very kind, and he donated 3 of these, and we're still using this up on the mountain, as are other organizations, I believe. Mike here, Funuru. Anyways, there's a few other organizations who are also using this. But when I was using the CMC, we were talking about poop. And it's a really sensitive topic, especially in an Asian culture. It's slightly taboo. So I was really worried when I approached the Sherpas and said, okay, listen guys, we're not going to be leaving poop on the mountain. We're actually going to be carrying it down with us. I was quite worried that this conversation may not go down very well. But as, where's Pasang in this? I think that's, yeah, Pasang. So as Pasang here said at this very meeting, he said, Dawa sir, before we were carrying it in here, now we are carrying it in here. What's the difference? And so there was immediate buy-in from the guys. And so it's been a great success now. And we use the CMCs on the mountain. But it's not just the CMCs, we also use rest stops. And that's an individual, it's the responsibility of every individual to carry down their own waste bags. I believe rest stop is represented here. But it doesn't just have to be rest stop. Any sort of toilet bag would be good. And there are also other organizations or other companies using it on the mountain now. But one of the problems we faced in the early days using the rest stop was it's just a silver foil bag. It's very, very anonymous. So when you're using it and you've told people you're going to carry it down yourself, be sure that people not everybody's going to comply. So to tackle that problem, I started writing people's names on the bag with permanent marker. And we had very few bags left behind on the mountain. So, and just as a side note as well, we actually use the rest stops in camp together with the CMCs, and just for added comfort. So actually, the CMC is not just a tool of necessity, but it's also a luxury for us there because it's like a toilet seat. Before I talk about this slide, I just want to quickly say we don't actually clean up the human waste of other people. We don't clean up the poop of other people, other expeditions. That's something obviously that I cannot ask my guys to do. That would be offensive. But what I can do is ask everybody, my Sherpas, my clients, anybody else who's on the mountain, to manage their own waste. So to be honest, I don't have a solution for the waste that is already on the mountain. I do have to be clear about that. Another thing that we started using on the mountain is what's called a parabolic solar cooker. And this has this particular device, the use of this particular device has a lot to do with this very building, the AAC. I was invited for a talk here in 2007, I think it was, where I came to the AAC together with Alton Byers. Dr. Alton Byers, whose pictures are here, and we're talking about climate change in the Himalayas and so on. And I proposed my idea to do these things on Everest, at which point an elderly gentleman, I believe a senior of the AAC, a man called Bill Putnam, heckled me from the audience. I'm not sure if Bill still visits the AAC or not, but Bill told me how it was. He said, so you're going to set up a base camp at Bakery, right? You're going to be talking about climate change. You're going to be giving flyers and information about climate change. I said, yes. And what are you baking these, what are you using to bake? I said, an oven. And what does the oven work on? Gas. He said, so you're going to be using fossil fuels at Everest Base Camp to cook, to make bakery goods and talk about climate change. And it sounded, it's a bit of a, it got me thinking. I said, well, that's true. That's just a de facto tool to use. That's just the de facto equipment to make apple pie, I suppose, a gas oven. But maybe there's a different way to do things. Maybe there's something else out there. And so that actually got me researching some other options. And so we got these parabolic solar cookers. So basically what a parabolic solar cooker is it's like a magnifying glass. It's a mirror. It's concave, and it focuses the sun's rays onto one single point, which would be this pot, which is painted black. Inside the pot, there's about 10 liters of water, and at base camp, when we were using it, it would boil 9 liters. We couldn't fill it all the way to the top. It was boiling 9 liters of water every 35 minutes. So, and that was free. That was free in that all I needed to do was take this parabolic solar cooker, and it was doing all the work for me. Otherwise, I would have to carry kerosene, I would have to carry propane gas, and so on. So before this, my expeditions and everybody else's expeditions, everybody was dirty. I think we talked about this. It was the Antarctic expedition as well. We were talking about how water is such a vital resource, and so you don't actually go and shower every day. But tell you what, when we had hot water all the time for free, my guys were the cleanest in the whole of base camp. So, but this was back in 2008, and back then you wouldn't see parabolic solar cookers in the Khumbu region. Khumbu region being the Everest region. And there's a slight history to that. It's not that they didn't try to introduce this. At the Eco Center in Tengboche Monastery, somebody put a demonstration model there. And everybody saw it, and it didn't work. And when I tried to introduce this, my Sherpa said to me, Dawa sir, it's not going to work. They've already tried it. It doesn't work. You know, it doesn't work here in the Khumbu. Maybe it works in Kathmandu or in their country, but not here. Okay, fine. So I didn't, pay any attention to that. We went ahead, and it worked anyways. So then after the expedition, on the way back to Lukla, to the airport, I stopped in Tengboche, and I looked at the thing. I said, well, why would it not work? It's a simple thing. It's not electronics or it's not mechanical. It's just a mirror. I mean, Why isn't it working? So, guess what? The guys had actually put the reflective side on the back facing the ground. And of course it's not going to work. But this is actually also, it's funny, but it's actually a very serious point. Because if you're going to implement new ideas in a place, you better make sure that it works the first time. So you better put the extra effort in to make sure that it works. Don't just go there half-heartedly and say, yeah, it's going to be fine. Because if it does not work the first time, it is going to take a long time to change people's minds about it. And the same sort of thing has happened in another region called the Mustang region in Nepal, where somebody set up a wind turbine. It's a very windy area, but the local people don't believe that wind energy works there because the wind turbine kept on falling over. And so what had happened there was a contractor had cut corners, and the guide wires and the foundation blocks were made far smaller and far less lower than standard. And so every time the wind was really strong, it would collapse. And so the local people didn't believe that wind energy was possible up there. Well, guess what? It is working now. There are other individuals, some friends of mine, who've set up wind energy there, and it's working fine. But it's taken nearly a decade from that first wind turbine to this one. So it takes a long time to change people's mindset once they see that something's not going to work, or once they believe that something's not going to work. And then talking about climate change. So really, as a mountaineer, there's very little that I can do sitting on Everest about climate change. I cannot reverse it. But what I can do is get the message out. And so in this regard, my good friend Apa Sherpa, he's climbed Everest 21 times. He's a good friend of mine. We climbed together many years. And so him and I, we partnered on this, and we came to the conclusion that the best way to get the message out there would be to use Everest as a platform, the highest platform in the world to get our message out. And the way to do it was every time that Apa breaks his own record, the media is always asking for pictures of him on the top. And so we gave them a picture that would actually mean something. So we got that out there. Stop climate change, let the Himalayas live. And so this was our sort of small contribution to what we could do. Also, at the same time, at the local level, we were organizing festivals. So this was the Khumbu Festival, where we got all the villages together and we talked about climate change. So we were using the disguise of fun and games to talk about something more serious. But not only just that, also to highlight our culture and how important it is. And if climate change is going to continue, it's going to destroy our culture. In other words, if there were to be another flash flood from Imja Lake, for example, it would wipe out all the villages along the way to Everest Base Camp. So not only would that be an environmental disaster, that would also be an economic disaster for the country. And more importantly, a lot of the Sherpa culture is going to get washed out because they're no longer going to be able to settle in that valley, and they're going to have to move away. And soon they're going to assimilate into the rest of Nepal or move to New York or Colorado or whatever it may be. And so we're going to lose our culture slowly. We also got involved with all the schools in the region, and we asked them all. We organized an art competition, and we asked them to draw pictures. And the question was, the basic question was, draw what has changed since your grandfather's time. So it was up to them to go to their elders and say, how was it back then? So that they have an understanding of what has changed in the natural environment. Also, we organized a marathon. This is Imja Lake, which I was talking about. This sits at the southern end, at the south of Lhotse, also the Everest Massif, I could say. And it sits above about 70% of the villages on the way to Everest Base Camp. And this lake did not exist back in the 1960s. I wonder if there's I think there's a picture in that corner there, and that it talks more about that. And in fact, my father in 1964 was with a Japanese expedition at the time, and they camped on the glacier that was here. Now it's a glacial lake about a mile long. And if this were to burst, it's going to send down billions of liters of water down, and everything's going to be devastated. So we organized a marathon from this point to Kumjung village, where we organized this festival. And the point of this was, let's see how fast the fastest runner can run compared to the estimated speed of the flash flood that would happen if this lake were to burst its banks. And so the fastest runner made it in 2.5 hours. ICIMOD, which is the research center based in South Asia, estimates that that water would reach the same spot in 35 minutes. So clearly it's not a problem that we can run away from. So because of these efforts, Appa and I were invited by the World Wildlife Fund to go to Copenhagen in 2009 during the UN FCCC meeting when we were supposed to be getting this great new solution to climate change. And so the WWF, we called it the European expedition, considering all the foreigners come to Nepal on a Nepali expedition. The Sherpas were going to Europe on an expedition as well. We got to talk at conferences like this one. We were involved in rallies where we were allowed to speak on stage to 15,000 people in Brussels. We had press meets. We got the opportunity to speak at the European Parliament and at the Houses of Parliament in Westminster in the UK. We were on television chat shows. Of course, other mountaineers like Reinhold Messner supported us. And we also got to meet some of the leaders, in this case, the president of Austria made time to meet with us. And what he's holding there is a piece of rock from the top of Everest, which Appa and I had collected over the years when we went up there. And the symbol there, what we were trying to do was to say, the ice is melting and all the rocks are coming out. This rock is from the top of the world, which is melting. So please do something about this. I don't have a slide of this right now, but we actually handed over 6 of these to our prime minister at the time, who was going to be at the summit, who was at the summit himself. And he did actually hand over one of these to President Barack Obama. I don't have a picture of that, unfortunately, but I do understand that President Barack Obama does have a piece of the summit, piece of rock from the summit of Mount Everest right now. And it all culminated in Copenhagen. We had a big hoopla and whatnot. But to be honest, nothing came out of that. Copenhagen was a big failure. We felt really disheartened, but also it was just an exercise in self-glorification, I felt. We went and we talked and nothing really came of it, so it was all for nothing. Myself, Appa, and this gentleman here, Prashant Singh, was a very, very close friend of mine. He was a director at the World Wildlife Fund in Nepal. We sat down together on a train between Brussels and Paris, and we were talking and said, we need to do something. And one of the questions that kept on coming up in Europe was, okay, we understand about the mountains, but what's happening on the ground level? What's happening to the forests and the villages and to other Nepalis, you know? And as Sherpas and as mountaineers, we only really know about our side of the mountains. And at that point, we decided that it might be a nice idea to actually travel across Nepal and document these stories and see what we can do in the future. So Prashant quit his job at the World Wildlife Fund, and we set up an organization called the Himalayan Climate Initiative. And it is through the Himalayan Climate Initiative that myself and Prashant and a few others of us do a lot of our projects now. So the first project that the Himalayan Climate Initiative did was to go on the Great Himalaya Trail. The Great Himalaya Trail is basically, I think it's like the Appalachian Trail, or there's a number of trails which connects a large distance together. And this is the same for Nepal, and the Nepal Tourism Board had just recently launched this, and they're looking to promote it. So we took that opportunity, coming from a tourism background ourselves, we took that opportunity to walk on that trail, to promote that, but also to get to know the real Nepalis and their problems. And actually also some of the most vulnerable districts in Nepal to climate change were on this particular trail. So we mapped out a trail that would go through all these places. And we set off on the 15th of January 2002. We were flagged off by the President of Nepal. Appa was given the flag, and credit to him, no matter what the weather conditions were, no matter how difficult the trail got, Appa never, never, never let go of that flag. It was always flying above his backpack. So that's me in the back there, not paying attention again. We also had in our team a photographer, a very close friend of mine called Samir Jangthapa. And we also had a journalist from the biggest newspaper in Nepal, Saurav Dhakal. So the four of us traveled across Nepal. Just some nice pictures of Appa there. Along the trail, we would stay as much as possible in the homes of people. And as many of you know, Nepali people are very hospitable, and so they do invite you into their homes, and they share whatever little they do have. Sometimes it was a party time, like this time, a wedding in a village, where you don't eat meat very often in Nepal, only on special occasions, and so we were invited to a wedding, and so there was meat. This is a good day. In remote areas, of course, there was no other option than to sleep in tents. And sometimes when the weather was really bad, and we couldn't pitch our tents up, we would just find whatever we could, like the yak shed. But it was still all fun. For the first half in the east of Nepal, we never lost any weight. The reason for that being that the east of Nepal has more Buddhist cultures, where alcohol is more freely served. And so none of us actually lost any weight as we were drinking in every village, and that was one of the ways they invited us to. They show their hospitality. So this is just another image. Some of the places that we got to camp. This is Foksundo in Dolpo. Machapuchare, that Erastus, you'll recognize this. This is in the middle of Nepal. I'm just showing you some nice pictures. But it was actually not the pretty places. It was actually the people that we went to meet there, like this old gentleman. This particular man, I remember very fondly. I walked with him for several hours. This was in Sankhua Sabha district towards the east of Nepal. And he was carrying a 50-kilo bag of grain, and I was not carrying anything really, but we were at the same pace. And I asked him, where are you coming from? He said, I'm coming from the district headquarters, which is 3 days away. And I said, oh yeah, what are you doing? And he said, oh yeah, my wife was sick, and I had to take her to hospital. And I said, well, where is she now? And he said, oh, just behind, so she was coming up. And I said, if she was sick, how'd you get her there? He said, I carried her. You had to carry her for 3 days to the hospital. And if you don't believe in love, you do now, This guy, just a wonderful little story. A good ending a good end to that story. She got better, but it is a reality in Nepal where we don't have much infrastructure. Life is hard, no matter how beautiful the country is. And some of the places still very, very, like I said, still very, very old-fashioned, even undeveloped. People still living the way their ancestors did. Not all bad. I mean, this is fantastic to see something like this. It's so genuine and authentic, but still hard life nonetheless. Just a girl walking back from the fields, having her smoke before she has to continue with the house chores, but nevertheless smiling. That's just a random picture of a 3-year-old kid on a high mountain trail on a horse. You can only see that in Nepal. But yeah, like I said, we were there to see what climate change was doing. And one of the most obvious things that you would also have noticed if you've traveled to Nepal is landslides. Recently, a lot of flash floods, whether they're glacial lake outburst floods or because of the intense monsoons in recent times. We're getting more and more flooding in Nepal. Forest fires is a big problem because it may be very, very wet during the monsoon, but it gets very, very dry in the winter months. And so the likelihood of forest fires is far higher. And I believe you have similar problems in the United States here due to drought. This is my village in Kumjung. It was the day that I actually got there. It was a windstorm that we had. It was a freak windstorm on the 8th of February of 2012. And we've never actually had wind ever blow anybody's roof off like that. And that was something quite spectacular. So it was not just happening in remote corners of Nepal. It was actually happening in my backyard as well. But the biggest problem that we have is not all those freak weather systems and all that. It's actually the destruction of crops. When 70% of Nepalis rely on agriculture, pests and changing weather systems are actually destroying agricultural practices or destroying crop yield, and agricultural practices need to be adapting to that. And that's one of the biggest problems that I foresee in the future. Coming back from the Great Himalaya Trail, we decided that something needs to be done. Of course, we gathered all this information, but what are we going to do? We prepared a report. We gave it to the Ministry of Environment to use in their future, as case studies in their future work, whether at the UNFCCC or wherever it may be. But on the ground, we wanted to become more powerful in advocating our issues. And a lot of the resources in Nepal go to the south of the country where the population is biggest. And so, of course, politicians are going to go where the votes are. And so that does mean that the mountain areas are largely neglected. And so we set up what we call the Climate Alliance of Himalayan Communities. And the CAHC basically brings all the leaders and representatives of those districts together, and we talk as one people, rather than people only from the Everest region or from the Rolwaling region or from the Makalu region or whatever it may be. We now talk as one voice as the Himalayan communities. And one of the things that has happened out of that, last week we had the new budget, and the national budget, and now the Great Himalaya Trail has been identified as a priority project for the government of Nepal, and now resources have been allocated towards developing it. Of course, that's opening another can of worms. How do we develop it? But that's a story for another time. Oh, I need to say as well, my dad is currently sitting as the chairman of the Climate Alliance of Himalayan Communities. He's and representing the Everest region, the Sagarmatha region. Our aim, this is a picture of Namche with electricity and all that. Not always the best example to use, but anyways, I use this picture because of how nicely it's lit up. When you compare that to Kathmandu, I mean, you know, we're far more developed in the villages here. Our aim is that one day all along Nepal, these villages could be lit up. You know, people do have opportunities. And that's the main mandate of the CAHC, to better the living conditions of people who live up in the mountains. But closer to home now, it's all fine and well to talk about the mountains and whatnot, but we live in Kathmandu, and I think we all know how badly polluted Kathmandu is. And so the Himalayan Climate Initiative has launched since 2008, 2013, February 15th, we launched a campaign called the Hamri Baini campaign. And the campaign basically is there to eradicate plastic bags from Kathmandu, and also to give income opportunities to vulnerable women who are vulnerable to trafficking or who have been rescued from trafficking from India. And the way we do that is we employ currently just over 100 women who make cloth bags, and we have partnerships with all the major supermarket chains in Kathmandu and in Nepal, and they have all agreed, and they are now charging 5 rupees, which is about 5 cents, for every plastic bag that they give to a customer. And then they also give the choice, look, for 30 rupees, you can actually buy a cloth bag, which you can reuse at a later stage. You can reuse again and again, and it's also supporting these women. And so until today, we've sold more than 70,000 of these bags, and it's become quite a nice success story. We also engage a lot of volunteers to get the message out there. So that's a nice story for us. It's becoming a really good success story. And on the back of this, in fact, another issue that we have in Nepal, in Kathmandu, is that we have a lot of problems with plastic bottles, which is another one of the big problems. So you see plastic bags and plastic bottles being one of the biggest problems that are in Kathmandu. And so as of this year, on 12th of June, we started another project through the Hamri Baini initiative where we collect plastic bottles, PET bottles, to recycle them. We've raised just over $1 million from the Coca-Cola Foundation, from the German Development Agency, from Ganesh Enterprises, which is the biggest recycling company in India, from UN Habitat and Practical Action. And our aim for this year is to collect 100 tons of plastic bottles in Kathmandu and have them sent over to India for recycling. Now, the way we're doing that is, again, it's a financial model. Already, plastic bottles are being picked through by what we call rag pickers that go through the garbage, and they're getting currently between 8 to 15 rupees per kilo of plastic bottles. So you have dealers from India, brokers from India coming to Kathmandu. They engage with these people, these rag pickers, and they give them 8 to 15 rupees for a bottle, a kilo of bottles. Whereas Ganesh Enterprises, who are actually the ones who are paying for it at the far end in India, who are the recyclers, they're paying 60 rupees for every kilo that comes in through their gates. So obviously, a huge amount of money is profit is being made by these brokers. And so the model that we have now is we are working directly with the rag pickers, as we call them. I don't mean to be derogatory. We say the waste workers. So they are now getting up to 30 rupees a kilo. And in 1 kilo, there's about 40 bottles. So now they're getting 30 rupees. The recycling company itself sends the trucks to Kathmandu, so they look after that. And also, all these bottles are then collected and sent back to India where they can be recycled. And so, obviously, that is a project that is still ongoing. It's just started. I cannot say whether that will be a success or not, but we'll give it our best. So, again, there's a slight social aspect to this. Most of the people that work, that are waste workers, are women, and mainly single women who have to support their families. So you'll see women and children who are most likely to be working in garbage. And so there's also certain aspects where we're trying to improve the status there, improve the working conditions of the people who are working there. But that's, again, another point. Finally, for myself, I personally will be going back to Everest again. I've said it in the past, and I'll say it again. As long as we keep going to the mountains, we're going to clean the mountain as best we can, either until we stop going to the mountain or until there's no garbage left. This year, I wanted to go to Mount Manaslu after the monsoon in the fall season, and on Ama Dablam as well. But unfortunately, after the avalanche, the inquiries for expeditions has gone down a lot. So I don't know if I'll have a large enough group to be able to pay for me to go there, as well as for me to have a budget to pay for the cleaning operations. I should mention here that the money that goes into all this, the cash for trash and the projects of cleaning the mountains, actually, I raise it from my clients. So it's actually through the commercial operations that I'm able to pay for that. I do not actively seek for donations. If somebody wants to give, I will graciously accept it, but I do not ask for it. The main reason there being that when I take money from other people, they want to attach their conditions to it. I don't care about conditions. I just want to get the job done, and the easiest way is to use my own money for that. So that's it for now, and I'd like to thank you all for giving me your ears and your time. Thank you. That's right. Actually, that is a big problem indeed. It actually goes in the same blue barrels that go to the landfill, the pit in Gorakshep. And that's why I have had some very good interactions with Gary Porter over there, who's trying to create a biogas plant in Gorakshep out of the human waste. And so it has been a problem for me. I recognize that. And Gary's working on that, and I'm fully committed to helping him because that would solve the final resting place of these bags.
But they have to unpack it again.
That's right. So the best way to do that, we've already discussed this, would be to take long metal hooks. Somebody just has to go in that pit and rip those bags open and pull out the plastic and leave the shit there, or however it may be. We'll discuss this with Gary at another point. Jim?
Following up on that, is there a best system or best set of bags or methodology for bringing it down to reduce that packaging in that sense?
I don't know exactly what you're meaning, but what
Is it clean mountain cans or rust stop or big bags?
It's a combination. It's a combination. There's no silver bullet. I mean, you can use whatever is most convenient to you and your expedition. For example, if you have a big expedition, so if you have, say, 15 people plus, then a CMC is very, very handy. But if you're only 2 or 3 people on the mountain, then obviously you're going to go for a more lightweight solution, which would be a rest up bag or a biffy bag or whatever it may be.
What about the accompanying photos for running with it? What expeditions, right?
Uh-huh.
What about there?
Yes. We have a lot of porter shelters being built right now. The Nepal Mountaineering Association actually builds and maintains porter shelters on the way to Everest Base Camp. And the porter shelters all come with pit toilets. In a lot of the places, in a lot of the villages, the pit toilets are actually built in the traditional way, which is then it is later used as compost in the fields. In some places like Gorakshep, it's not an ideal solution. And so I think that's where again, Gary, if he can solve this problem, would be fantastic. But no pressure. There are over 30 companies working on Everest in a season, and I can't say that all of them are using these best practices, but a large proportion are, and there are more every year. And I think that's more of a market mechanism than anything else. It's because the clients see what we are doing, my expeditions and other expeditions, and saying, well, they're doing it that way, why the hell are we still sitting behind a rock? You see? So it's actually what the clients are demanding now, that there are better standards. And so I don't think it's always out of the goodness of somebody's heart that they're going to do this, but if money is involved, things will change. And hey, whatever works, right? The other question you were asking was, the second one? Oh, yeah. Okay, well, there's already a garbage deposit system in Nepal. Sorry, Leona, I keep moving. There's already a garbage deposit system in Nepal for many, many years where you leave a $4,000 deposit. It has had a certain amount of a deterrent for people not to throw garbage away, not to throw it anywhere. But it's not as effective, especially since the monitoring is very weak on the side of the government. Nevertheless, there's a lot less garbage today than there was 10 years ago or there was 20 years ago. And I think a lot of people would agree who've been there in the past and who are there today that the mountain is not as dirty or is maybe even clean in a lot of places. But having said that, again, not everybody's a responsible operator, and when they can, avoid the eyes of the monitors, the liaison officers, they will, or they have done. This new system that was supposed to be introduced this year by the government of everybody having to bring down 8 kilos, every person is supposed to bring down 8 kilos. I'm actually a big opponent of that, to be honest. I argued that at the ministry. The reason I'm saying this is because over the years that I've been cleaning up, the trend is that there's less and less garbage to be collected. So we had the high of 5,000 kilos in 2009, but in 2012 we only managed to find about 500 kilos. So there's less and less garbage to be found. So the reason I was opposing that was because the government was saying we're going to force them all to bring down this much garbage. But then the problem then becomes, if there is no garbage, then people are going to create garbage just to meet that quota. And and that's where I have a problem with that. My solution would be a very simple one, which is basically do your job, which is we pay you, the liaison officers, to monitor the expeditions, make sure that they're there doing their job. I mean, why create a new system that's not going to work when you already have a system in place which would work if you just did your job?
We'll take one more question.
Oh, Erastus?
Just a comment, all right, please. Is this weighing and pay sustainable?
Is this weighing and paying sustainable?
Yeah, because we tried it and we found the same garbage going back. The mountain. Also, we have the system of paying wire snares from the nationals. The rangers, when you find wire snares somewhere, we bring them in the office. We pay. But we found again the same wire snares go back and we lose, they come back again. So how it's not sustainable to pay.
Okay, the weighing and paying system is slightly different in our case. It's yes, there are always people who try to cheat the system, and so we try to be on top of that. For example, the guys will collect garbage, but then they go and dip it in water so that it weighs another 5 kilos or so. Sometimes quite boldly, people put big rocks in there, and they think that we're not going to be opening it up. So we do random checks. We open everything, we weigh it, but then we have a big tarpaulin sheet out there, and we just dump all the contents out. And so if there's any rocks or anything like that, we catch that person immediately, and they do not get paid for that then. Obviously, we pay them for the garbage they have collected, we don't pay them for the rocks. But then people very quickly realize that we are actually checking what's going there. But that's because it's my money. So I want my money to be used properly. I want it to go to paying garbage, not paying rocks. If the government were going to do this, I don't know how successful it would be. But at this stage, if you're going to ask me, is it going to be sustainable? No, it's not going to be sustainable, because it's only going to be sustainable as long as I'm there and I'm doing it. If somebody else is going to go there and do that, it'll be sustainable as long as they're there. But like I said, as long as I'm there, I'm going to continue doing that until the mountain is clean or I'm not there anymore.
All right. Thank you, Steve.